House of the Dragon has been a surprise for a lot of us, and we're already waiting for season 2. Today we're going to talk about Daemon Targaryen and why he works in the show. Setting up a character. The first scene we get with Daemon, although screaming creepy uncle vibes, it does say a lot about his character. Daemon is shown sitting on the king's throne, which is pretty fucking crazy to do, and a dude just came back to visit. Remember, you could be killed for sitting on the throne if you're not the king. Without doing much, the show has already told us that Daemon doesn't really care about what other characters think about him or even their politics. It also shows that he's willing to take risks and he has a certain confidence towards him. He pretty much just shows up because he's confident that he's going to be Viserys' heir, even though Viserys is having another kid. This perfectly fits into the show don't tell aspect of storytelling, where instead of characters saying Daemon is cool or this and that, we're shown that this is what he is as soon as he's introduced. Also, you'll find that all the other characters around him react to what he's doing instead of the other way around. This makes him feel like a driver in the plot, either when that's them reacting to him sitting on the throne, or the scene where the council is talking about what to do with them after he uses the golden cloaks to make the example out of criminals. It's constantly feeling like he's making his own moves, which definitely gives his character a sense of urgency. I mean, he literally goes to Dragonstone against the king's orders and steals a dragon egg while trying to marry a lowborn while he's married to Lady Rhea. I'm sure some of you like that aspect of his character alone. The fact that he's very unpredictable and pretty much anything he does is gonna have major consequences towards the plot. This also helps make the story feel weighty and have consequences. Character connections. A huge part of what can make a character work is how well they mesh with other characters in the show or movie. Daemon being a main character is pretty much in the center of this. Viserys have fucked up multiple times by welcoming his brother back, and he's constantly paying the price for it. Although it never feels cheap when Daemon's allowed back, because it's satisfying to see him drive the plot like we said earlier, but it also gives insight into both Viserys and Daemon's minds. You really do get the sense that they love each other. Later in the series it becomes a little bit more obvious, but I personally like the more subtle details earlier in the season. At first we know nothing about Daemon, and if you take his actions at face value, it almost seems like he hates the king. He constantly insults him and berates him, and honestly he just makes his life a pain in the ass. But yet in scenes with the sea snake, he tells him not to insult his brother. And in the first episode, Daemon is really the only one to call Viserys out on being weak. Otto and the rest of the council really are just trying to take advantage of him. They even talk back to Viserys and he doesn't do anything. A lot of the times, Viserys doesn't really even seem like a king, and Daemon knows that he can get away with all the stuff without any punishment either. He literally nicknames Viserys' dead son and heir for a day, literally just to fuck with him. So while yes, you can interpret this as Daemon trying to coerce or trick Viserys into naming him his hand or his heir, in reality he's just saying what's true about his brother. He's trying to help him. You could tell Viserys is probably holding on to childhood moments of his brother, seeing as how he brings up their mother Alyssa when Daemon comes back from the Stepstones. And in reality, Viserys is blinded by stale memories of his old family, which leads him to letting his brother back every time. This is a neat time because it shows that they each have a soft spot for each other, and Daemon brings out a lighter side in Viserys, which is why it's so satisfying when he picks up his crown later in that season. And of course, there is his relationship with Rhaenyra. Although the relationship was surprising to me, I've yet to read the books, so there you go. But it seems like she looked up to Daemon and she was definitely interested in him from the start. At least in the show, we don't know if Daemon was interested in Rhaenyra the whole time or only after he attempted sex with her. But their marriage does show growth in Daemon's character later in the season. At the start of the show, Daemon was really only interested in being on the throne. This is pretty obvious. But then after the time skip, Daemon is shown to not really be interested in politics at all. He'd rather stay cooped up in Pentos. And after he comes back to King's Landing, you might think that he still wants the crown. But in the scene where he crowns Rhaenyra, we see that he has lost the need or want for it. When Sir Ara gives Daemon the crown, I've seen some people say it's Daemon lusting for power or he wants it for himself. I see it as him being in shock that Arg was even able to get the crown in the first place, but I also think it's him remembering his brother and grieving for him instead of being filled with a need for power like before. This simply just isn't the same character at the start of the show. The story paces it nicely and gradually shows how and why Daemon slows down his selfishness. Don't get me wrong though, he's still not a good guy. He chokes out his wife and kills a random dude just so him and Rhaenyra can get married. But those are just some of the main characters in the plot. Let's look at some of the other side characters that can tell us more about him. Although Laena isn't given much, she's still a pretty cool character, and she does tell us that Daemon is at his best when he's tied in with his Valyrian roots. She sees that Daemon isn't really happy, and this is because he's on land far away and not with his people. Daemon and Laena's daughter Baela has a dragon, which causes Daemon to spend more time with her and leaving his other daughter Rhaena feeling left out. This is obviously especially Daemon trying to connect to his Valyrian culture, which is also supported by him always reading Valyrian books and stories. Aemon looks up to him. This is shown when after Daemon cuts off Vaemon's head, after Aemon almost looks impressed at his ruthlessness. It's obvious at the very least he respects Daemon, which is also shown after he stops fighting at the dinner with his family. So I think it's pretty obvious that Daemon's pretty important for a lot of the characters. Not only do his actions have consequences, but usually a lot of characters are affected by them. But now let's see just how deep his character is. Layers. So at the surface, we've already established that Daemon is a badass who wants the crown and will do and say despicable things for glory and to further his goals. But this doesn't seem different from a lot of characters, so what makes us care? Well, first off, we covered earlier, Daemon won't do anything for the crown because he loves his family. He never tries to kill or assassinate his brother, and when Rhaenyra literally gives him the option of killing her, he just doesn't do it. This makes him understandable and relatable. Yeah, sure, he still does terrible shit and he wants power, but he still has a soft spot. And a lot of the time when he does do bad shit, it's understandable, at least in regards to the story. Understanding why a character does bad things is crucial for having interesting plot developments. For instance, it's hard to understand why Daenerys burned down all of King's Landing and innocent people. I can't look from her perspective and relate to why she would do that, but I could see and understand why Tyrion would kill his father. In both cases, these characters do things that you could consider to be wrong, but one situation is a lot more interesting because I could put myself in Tyrion's shoes. You don't always need your villain to be understandable. Sometimes you just need something for the good guys to root against, but if you want an interesting or relatable character, they have to be somewhat gray. I understand why Daemon went and punished criminals using his golden cloaks. I can understand why he talked shit to his brother and Otto, although they probably don't deserve it. This helps make him feel like a real person. Also, another very subtle part that shows that Daemon is impotent, meaning he has problems getting it up. On the surface, we have a very masculine, over-the-top type of guy, imposing his will on other people, but this expectation of macho-ness turned on its head by making him impotent. It makes him deeper than just a caricature. There's also multiple different ways you can interpret this layer of him. Not being able to finish can be seen as a moral failure, like when Daemon walks out on Rhaenyra, he realizes what he's doing is wrong, or at the very least somewhat weird, so he can't get it up, and this disgust is what leads him to get drunk or try to forget what he did. It could be simply just a symbolization of his character in general. Daemon always is wanting more. He has all this pent-up energy, but he can never quite get the satisfaction he's aiming for. He aims for glory and the stepping stones, but gets pissed because his brother has to help him. He gets married to a house he thinks is boring and he really doesn't care about it at all. He wants to be king, but he simply has no chance of being one since the way he was born. Not only is he born the king's brother, which makes his claim weak, but he's born impulsive, brash, and violent. Another interpretation the show goes with is his impotence could also be a side effect of his appreciation for Valyrian culture. After Daemon fails to finish, Mysaria tells him that she could bring in someone with silver hair. Also, Rhea says that their marriage was never consummated. Whatever the reason is, it subverts her expectations in a good way. And another layer to Daemon's character is his political intelligence. A huge part of Game of Thrones was the political intrigue of the whole show. Characters who make smart moves, live longer, and are generally more liked. It seems like House of the Dragon is no different. At multiple points, Daemon shows that he has this intelligence in subtle ways you may not have noticed. In episode 4, it's pretty likely that Daemon takes Rhaenyra to the pleasure house just so that he has a better chance to marry her. If Rhaenyra has sex before she's married, then it's a lot less likely that other lords will want her. This could lead to Daemon being the only decent option for Rhaenyra, and since Rhaenyra is heir, this will thus increase his power. Another interesting thing he does is that after killing his wife Rhea, he's confronted by her cousin, where he rightly accuses Daemon of murder. To shut him up, Daemon brings up the fact that he has the right to Runestone. While it's a small moment and hasn't come up again, it definitely makes Daemon feel competent when it comes to politics. Not to mention that in this same wedding, he starts making moves with Lyanna, who at this point has the biggest dragon, so there's multiple power moves going on in play. And while him going to find the stepping stones is more of an honor grab than anything, it was what allowed him to come back to King's Landing to try and marry Rhaenyra in the first place. All in all, I think Hot D has done a really good job of representing and fleshing out characters from Fire and Blood. Also, I'll probably do more character breakdowns in the future, so if you like this video, subscribe. See ya.